Yeah. Okay. So I just wanted to show that. Now let's make a new scene. So you can file, let's do save this, save project. We've got a scenes folder. So let's just add a scene here. There's two ways to do it. You can go file new scene, but then you don't necessarily know where it's going to get added. You can just right click here in terms of scenes in your folder and create scene. Give it a name. We'll call this cutscene. And then double click on that. Before we do that, I want to copy this. Copy a couple of things actually. We'll copy him. And the plane. And then we'll go into our cutscene and paste them both. Notice that my lighting is not set up now because it's not been baked. So if we go to Window, Rendering, Lighting Settings, I need to drag my sun source, this directional light, into the sun source in the lighting settings and then generate. It's baking. This is the longest I've seen it take. Might be because it's set for CPU. Actually, we can do a force stop. Let's set it for, progressive GPU. And now it's preparing the bake. We'll see if that makes it go quicker. Yeah, much faster. So if you have a GPU-based computer, just remember to set that up, and it'll work better. It also may be that this baking's taking longer because I've set these to static, which will make them bake light maps for the objects. If they're so in other words, if we have there's two different types of shadow mapping in Unity. There's baked light maps, and then there's real-time light maps. And if it's the difference is just whether or not an object is set to static, or otherwise it'll bake the light map for the object and load that from a texture in game if you set it to static. So we'll show you what that looks like in a sec. Takes a while obviously to bake because it's going through this process of baking it right now. While we're doing that, I can show you where you want to get your mocap. If you go to the asset store, let me move my light window down here and do a search for free mocap. You'll get this huge mocap library. There's three. It's so big they had to split it into three parts. The one that we want just as a default is the first one, library part 1. These others are kind of more sports related types of mocap and some specialized stuff. So if you're doing like a fight scene or whatever, you may want to look at those. The way you can tell what they look like is that each one of these comes with a spreadsheet and is part of the package content. And in that, when you get that spreadsheet, you'll be able to look at it, and it'll, because right now they're labeled like 1, or there's folders that have like 1 through 80 or something like that. The first library goes from 1 to 40, the next one I think from 40 to 60, and the next one from 60 to 80. And the spreadsheet will tell you what each one of the folders represents in terms of the type of motion capture. This one has a lot of walk cycles, run cycles, and some ladder climbing and things like that. So we're going to import that into our project. So I'll go ahead and start that. And when it's done, we will continue. Okay, so we've imported all of the mocap animation. We don't need this demo stuff. If you don't want it, you can delete it. The main thing we're looking for here is the mocap animations, and you can see there's a folder full of numbered folders. Each one of those contains animations. So if you open up one, click on this, nothing happens. But if you open up the FBX, this little play icon will show you the animation and what it looks like. This one seems to be broken. So he's somebody playing hopscotch. But you can tell based on the names or the numbers, we can't really tell much about these. So there is a spreadsheet that will give you a better description of what each one represents. And this covers the spreadsheet for all of the packages. So you can see that the third package contains some walks. This package goes all the way up to 40 based on the number of folders. So it stops at 40. So yeah, there's a lot. Just trying to see what the latter ones. So there's Charleston's in the next packages, Macho Walk, Sexy Walk. Some of those could be interesting. Clumsy Walk, Lavish Walk, Sad Walk. Some of those might be interesting. You may want to play with those. Cartwheels. So yeah, you may want to get all of them. Download each package, but for today, just for this video, I'm going to turn and focus on 40 and below, the first package. So the ones that I'm interested in to start off with, I think are the folder 7 and 8, as well as 9, and then we'll get into some other ones in a minute, so I'll leave this open. So the other thing is this light baking in here turned, because I had this set for static, it was set for some sizes, and because of its scale, it wasn't really showing, or it was taking too long to render. So we're going to do real-time lighting for now. I'll see if I get into what the baked lighting would look like for static. One way to see what you're dealing with in terms of render or baking time is if you pull down up here under scene on shaded, there's this baked global. It may be that the checkerboards are slightly overlapping, and that's what's showing the resolution, or it's this grid. So if you go under Window, Rendering, Lighting Settings, basically the thing that's controlling is in this light mapping settings, this light mapper. Remember I set it to GPU. We want direct samples 32. Right now the indirect samples are at 512. So if we change that to like 128 or even 64, and environment, let's do 128, and then the texels per unit, light map resolution 40 texels per unit, so we could go 20. So these are samples. I'm just trying to make it faster basically, and then this would be indirect resolution, which is the indirect lighting. It's 2 texels per unit, that's fine. And then you can change the light map size to be something like 2048. So notice that changed my texel density. That's these checks. So by saying light map resolution, let's set it to 10. See how the checks, so there's 1. So 1 texel per unit. This is 2. And then 4. It's starting to get smaller. Let's go 10. Gets a little bit smaller. And basically you just figure out what's enough in terms of the global illumination or the light mapping. If you want ambient occlusion, you can turn it on. Then these can change the intensity. And then this is the quality of the light map in terms of default setting. So let's try setting baking based on that. Let's see what happens. So it's baking. Saying it's going to take, there we go. So now we got our light. So it's going to be about another minute. And this is for, because it's set to static, this is for like baking shadows into your textures. It's not really baking them into the textures, it's baking them into a separate texture that overlaps with like a light map that's on top of the scene. So once we add some buildings or something into this, we may look at doing that. But I just wanted to show you how to kind of optimize it for preview. Right now, it's like it's not really, it doesn't make sense really to do it because there's no objects casting shadows. It's just a plane, a flat plane. So I can cancel this. I can turn off static. If I hit generate lighting now, because it's static, it's just done. There's no, because it's not static, there's no objects in there. If I go back to shaded mode, I get my calculations. You can tell again that his reflection map isn't really making sense because there's no light reflection probe in this scene. So let's add one. Just add it there. And this will just capture the ground. Again, we have to make the ground static for it to show up. Then bake. So now he has the proper reflection mapping. All right, so now let's save. I want to show you how to take these animations that these mocap animations that we've imported and use them to create a cutscene. Save this project. So the first thing we're going to need to do to make a cutscene is we need a timeline with a playable kind of timeline interaction in the scene. So if we go to game object, create, I was just trying to see if there was a way to add it without, but I don't think there is. So what you want to do is create, you could put a timeline on any object, but it doesn't make sense to put them on something that's in the scene that may change. I like to make my own empty game object and call it timeline, so I actually know which object has the timeline on it. So I'm going to make this timeline. I'm just renaming it up in the inspector. And now I can add a component and then do a search for playable director right here. It's got a little director's chair. Just add that. And the playable asset we have to make. So if you look, there's not going to be anything in here right now. So in our assets, we'll make it, let's make it loose in the assets. We're going to create a new playable, not playables, sorry. It's under timeline right here, about midway down. And that's got this little like multi-frame kind of view. We'll call this Bender cutscene. And go back to our timeline. And then just if we click here, there's our Bender cutscene. So now we've got a timeline playable in our scene but we need to see it in a timeline. So the way you can open the timeline is you can go to Window, Animation, no. Trying to even see if you can, yeah, sequencing here. So it's weird. The naming is so weird, but you're creating a sequence, and that's where the timeline is. You can open it that way. It opens up here. You can drag that down here by clicking on the tab. But right now we've got, so this is our Bender cutscene timeline. You can see by the name here, right? And if we click off, there it comes back. But there's nothing in the timeline. So what we want to do is add Bender, drag him down into it, add an animation track. Okay, so now we've got Bender, Animator, and then an empty track timeline down here. One thing that'll make it easier for you to edit is if you, over here on the right, this little gear window, change it from frames to seconds. It defaults to frames, but you'll be able to tell more about the time that it's taking in seconds. So now we want to add our first walk animation to Bender here so that we can make him walk. We don't really know where he's walking or what he's walking around, but I'm just going to take it piece by piece and show you how to make him walk first. So we'll find an animation for him. To do that, we need our spreadsheet, and we need to go and look at our project and the Mocap folders. So let's look for a walk and just go through here and find where there would be some walks. So there's a lot in 7 and 8. So we'll go and look in there first to see what we can find. Oops, I went into Blender, sorry. I'm going to go ahead and close this. And in Unity, go into 7. Here's our animations. We'll click on each one and take a look and see what happens. So there's the first walk. Notice that it's just scrolling through the animation and that it's kind of got a little bit of a hiccup in the loop. And the other thing you'll notice is that it started walking on this line, but it's slowly drifting. I'll show you how to fix that. All of these, since they're mocap, are going to have a little bit of rotational drift and Y drift, and we can fix that in the mechanism settings. So that's that animation. Let's open up the others and see if there's anything different. Pretty much the same. Let's look at the last one. I think that it might be different. Yeah, it might. Some of these are really bizarre. It's kind of a John Wayne Duke walk. Let's see this one. Yeah, I'm not liking these. Let's look at the 8s. Check out the last one. So that one's got a bit of a stride to it. It's kind of cool. It makes him look heavy. I like that. Let's look at this one and see. It's too fast. You can change the speed of these in terms of how fast they'll play. So if you want to just check it here, you can scroll this down and see it in slow motion. If you were doing like a giant or something walking across so you can change, you can set the speeds. But look at them. Just sample them at the actual rate and find the animation you want. In this case, I think this 811 is the one I like because it looks heavy. Now, again, because we're looking at it as part of an embedded object, we can't do anything to it here in terms of this. But if we go into edit mode, we can add clips and samples. Like we can cut, if this was a longer animation, it had a bunch of different parts, we could create a whole bunch of clips. Right now it's just called 811. I'm going to call this like heavy walk just to change the name so it's more descriptive. And I want to make a loop, so I'm just going to hit this plus on the list for clips, make a second one, and call this heavy walk loop. Do an underscore. Okay. Now right now it's not set to loop. It starts in this T pose, which we want to lose, and it goes and does a couple of steps and then kind of does a little hiccup there at the end, right? So we need to make a loop. So get out of the T pose and find like where both feet are planted, like there. That's our first stride. So we can set that as our starting point. Notice as I scroll here, it scrolls up here as well. So I can see that I want to set my endpoint on the loop to something like that, where his foot's planted. And then notice that when I did that, I get these little graphs for each one of these loop time, root transform rotation, root transform position, and that all of these are showing like yellow, green, and red. Basically, these color indicators tell you whether or not it's loopable and whether the position's in roughly the same spot. So, and as you pull down on each one of these graphs, you see what's available for creating a loopable animation, green being how you want to start the loop. So it looks like that as far as position, or I usually look at the first one in terms of loop time, and it's just looking at position of all of the objects, not its actual root transform. So this is a good start with the bake. And if we take this left crop point and move it to where we get to a green, notice that we get 3 greens. That's pretty good. Kind of want to have them 3 greens at the heights of their arcs. So, and you look, you can see that the feet match. So now if we just watch that loop, there's the loop. It's pretty good down here. Now the trick is we want to, you can see how it's drifting right here across the grid. So we want to make it so that it doesn't drift. We'll stop the playback. I like to get it so that it's on the line. And once it's drifted, it's hard to reset. So what I like to do is go ahead and apply this. I've created my heavy walk loop, and then just click on it again so that he's back on this center line. And then go into edit. Now I've got my loop set up, and I want to get this root transform rotation right here. I can bake the loop time, that's fine. May want to bake the loop pose. Excuse me. And the main thing I want to look here in terms of getting him to walk a straight line is this root transform rotation and its offset. So if we look at, he's walking, he's drifting a little bit to the left. So what I want to do is I want to rotate this offset a little bit to the negative so that it turns him, I believe, in the opposite direction. Let's see what happens. Still, I think that I want to bake into pose based on body orientation as well. I might need to go in the opposite direction. So it was already at an angle there. Let me apply and reset. I want to get him on that line so I can compare. It's easier to see that he's walking in a straight line. So I've got my offset of 0.81. And you can see he's already walking in a straighter line, but he still drifts just a tiny, tiny bit. So we can go a little bit more. Where that right foot's constantly stepping on the line. He's holding the line pretty good with that. Okay, maybe a little bit more. Let's just do 1. And we will apply and see what that looks like. All right, so now the way we can see is we'll apply it to Bender here with that timeline. So if we go back to our timeline, go into our timeline window here, right click on this track and say add from animation clip. Then we want to add our heavy walk loop. Now here's our animation, okay? So you can see where he walks. He's walking in place. We want to get him to move. So if we go back to that loop, this animation here in the project, we're going to want to make sure the root motion isn't baked. Edit. I think it might be that we need the root transform. So he's moving. Let me check my timeline. He's not moving. Here's where you can change the speed. Trying to remember where this gets set. Import constraints, import animation. Position error, that's all good. I believe, yeah, it might be the loop pose is what's going on. So we'll leave that unchecked. Root transform we do want to apply. And the Y is probably going to need some fixing too, but we don't know yet until we see it on the floor. Root transform position, that's all good. Let's apply that and see. Going to lock this so that I can see how it plays. I just want to make sure he's not walking in place when I hit play. So yeah, he's moving. For some reason it was walking it in place on the scroll. So the point is like we've got this walk and I need a camera in place to sort of show him as he walks. So I want to see this sort of side view of him walking. So we can see if we need to make any other adjustments in the animation. So in order to do that, instead of using the main camera, which is what it's defaulting to here, we can add, using Cinemachine, create a virtual camera. It's going to do this CM VCam 1. We'll call this CM side cam 1, just to give it a better description. And with this, you get another virtual camera. It's similar to the one that I was showing you earlier with the third-person 3-camera rig. But in this one, you only have a follow transposer and a look at transposer. If we do follow, we apply it to some object. It'll be looking at that. It'll follow that object. The camera will shift with it. So if we made it follow him, let's just do that. Let's do it based on his bender. Yeah, there we go. And then we're going to make it look at his, let's make it look at his head. And let's make it look at bender too. And let's make it look at his head. Well, I'm hoping for some bob. So now when it follows that, we do this animation, you're going to see how he's walking and the camera's panning with him. Okay, and then he stops and he's kind of just looking around. The reason he's looking around is because he's got that character controller on him because we copied him from the previous setup where I'd done the third person character, and he's got this third person controller on him. So it's kind of like saying, okay, well, play this animation and then allow this script to execute. But while this timeline is being executed, there's no reason to have any control on him. So if we hit play, just to give you an idea, it's walking, and when it gets to the end of the timeline here, it stops the execution of the timeline, but he's in third person mode. And because my camera is doing what I've told it to, the default camera, right? It's trying to follow the rules that I applied in this timeline, but on a third person character who's doing all of this rotation and stuff as I'm controlling him, okay? So that means we could do one of two things. We could add another camera and transition to that in the timeline and hand over control to it so that its priority is set up. Or whatever this camera's priority is, and when I say priority, it means there's this little tab over here when you click on the camera itself. They all default to 10. His controller, there is no other camera. We didn't I didn't copy the camera rig that was set up in the other third person. He's got all the camera controls, or he's got all the third person controls, but there's no camera control that's like mapping to him. So if I wanted to make this handoff at the end of this to a third person controller, that's what I would do, is I'd have to put it in the scene. So right now, it's kind of defaulting to this camera. What we want to do is, if we want to have multiple types of cameras set up, we need to add a timeline for cameras. So if you right click on our timeline and say Cinemachine track, then you can drag your main camera into that so that it says, okay, this Cinemachine is controlling this actual brain. And then from here we can right click and add a Cinemachine shot. And right now it doesn't have a camera applied because we need to apply that. And we'll make that first camera, our CM side cam 1, be that shot. And it's like, if we do this, it's going to go, so what? It's going to do the exact same thing that we just did. And that's it, right? But if we have a second camera added, so if we add a new Cinemachine create virtual camera, CM, we'll call this CM front cam. And we will make it follow Bender and look at Bender. And then we're going to grab it and move it to be in front of him. And we can just see what we'll see what that looks like by adding it as a track in here, so that when we pull our view, our playback head off to the camera, we can go to the game mode and see what that looks like in terms of positioning. And this is where you may want to drag this and create two views so you can get the camera view and its position. So I can select this and then actually select the front cam and then move it so that I get the camera positioned the way I want it. So maybe I want to look down on it more. And you can see where I'm targeting by targeting that look at. For Bender, it's targeting something in his right shoulder. So I can change the look at to be something else. So maybe I want it to be his head. See how it shifts position? It gives me something more central to look at. So what happens is I do a cut right now, the way these cameras, so if I drag the timeline, you can see I'm going this walk and then cut to there. Let's just keep that and look at it. So there's the playback. Cut. So, and then it cuts to another. which is my virtual cam, but I don't have a virtual cam. It's just going back to that side cam. So let's say, just to kind of show you how this control works. Right now, it's cut and it's gone back to my original timeline camera, the CM side cam 1. If we want it to end up on the front cam and stay there, we can basically set its priority to be 11, so that it'll be the higher priority of the two, and when it defaults and lets go, it'll end up holding on that camera. So there's our front camera, and then when it stops, it's there. Okay, so that's, you know, pretty good. What if we want to, we don't want to do a hard cut, we want it to transition to that? We can just grab this track and then pull it over, so that as we're scrolling, then the camera will hand off from one position to another kind of automatically. Okay, and let's see what that looks like. And then it just releases it. So we're starting to get the beginnings of a cutscene. Let's save. There's nothing really cutscene about it right now, but one of the things I want to show you is at the end we can have this cutscene playing where it's taking control and showing a bunch of stuff going on, animations in the scene, and we can end up with a playable, or we can end up on a camera that is set up to follow him around in game mode. So if we add a new CM free look, we're going to keep the name of that. We'll set it to do what we wanted it to do in the other one. In fact, rather than copying this, I'm going to delete that, save this. I'm just going to copy our camera setup from the other project or other scene. So if I go back to my project, assets, I think it was in scenes, and go into our sample scene, we'll just take our free look camera here, copy it, and then go back to our cut scene, don't save, and paste. So now we have our free look camera. We're missing the transforms and stuff, but hopefully the other settings stayed the same. So let's do, we want it to follow Bender. Which one is it? We can see once we apply it where it applies to. Yeah, we wanted the lower one. And then we want it to look at Bender's head. Okay. So just by that, we've got our, yeah, it kept our positions, our toggle positions, and our controls. We just had to target him with it. And all we need to do to make it the final camera so that it'll hold in terms of the look is change its, make it the last camera in the timeline, the handoff. So if we take it and drag it, we're in game mode. Yeah. Oh, this is one of the bugs I've noticed. So when I went out of the scene and came back in, I lost my playhead. I can't activate this on the timeline. It's something that I've seen again and again. I'm not sure what the deal is. It's probably a bug. I'm not sure if they're working on it. It seems to have to do with if I have this toggle lock. Notice that as soon as I untoggled the scene, it freed it up and allowed me to get my playhead back. And now I can lock it again. The main reason for this lock is so that you don't lose this. This window stays open even when you select other things, so you're not jumping to, you don't lose the timeline. So it's a way of being able to see stuff. But mainly I just wanted to get this playhead back so I could do things with the scene. So now if I take that free look and drag it in here at the end, I can just make it either a hard cut or whatever, and it doesn't have to be like forever. I just need to give it a priority of 12 since my other one is 10, so it'll hold on that, and then I can do a transition if I want, so that it goes from It's going to shift past his shoulder to be a follow camera. Okay. Could do a hard cut if you wanted. Let's see which way it looks best. So follow, front, and there's my playback. I've got my control. I can run around and do things. So it's like I've gone from cutscene to gameplay mode pretty seamlessly. Wasn't a great cut. I don't like that fly over his shoulder, so I'm going to make it a hard cut. See what that looks like. So there's my mode. Yeah, and that's not great either. It's just the cut, I mean, isn't great. Maybe what I don't want is I don't want this. Here's what you can do is you could basically copy that side cam, CV, paste it into there. Here's the side cam again, and do a fade between the two. So like this front cam as a transition will go transition to the side cam slowly because it's following, and it'll come to here. And then for that, then I can do, so that way I'm not flying by his head. So it'll hold the side cam and then just start. So the idea is to get it to where it shifts it out and then back in. Okay, and you could set up a different camera for this depending on the transition. But I just want to show you how that works. So we've created kind of an intermittent stage for the transition. Follow forward. And now we're in game mode. Okay. So basically just trying to avoid any kind of really jerky, quick transitions that cause the camera to fly in a way that looks like it's sort of like a roller coaster ride. And then a lot of this is just tweaking to get the timing right. It's pretty quick. Yeah, it's not the best camera to do as an intermittent transition. But it'd work. You might even, I wonder if you can transition between two. Probably can't do multiple overlaps. Yeah, see how it starts to override the other. All right, so anyway, let's make this into a cutscene, and then we'll add some extra animation and some more cameras and stuff. So let's pull this game mode back up to here so we can see our scene. Now we got to think about how we want to build this out as a cutscene. So let's say he's walking city street. We can add, I'm just going to block this out because we don't know what the buildings will look like yet. We don't even know how many buildings we're going to need. It kind of depends on the way our cameras are set up. But this might be an intro to him, you know, like a Crossy Roads game or something like that. So let's add game object, 3D object. We'll add a cube. And this is going to end up being our sidewalk. So we're just going to put it wherever he's walking. our background. Okay, so this is a good start. We've got enough to show him walking down the street. We've got that covered. Depending on where we end up here, we may need to put some more buildings here on this side. We can set the time of day. So let's go back to him. So what we want, I think, is for him to walk around the corner here. So we'll set our camera up and watch him walk around here. He'll turn the corner, walk down the street, maybe start running, and end up like he's trying to catch a bus or something, and end up standing here waiting for a bus. So we're going to need to find those animations and set up those camera moves. So what we want to do is go into our timeline, select him, and we're going to grab him and move him. But as far as this animation, we need to set, really what we want to do is set an offset for where it starts, because when we applied it, it's going to be applied based on sort of center of the world. So in order to do that, we need to grab and activate, like grab the animation loop, the heavy walk, select this little four-way arrow here, that's a clip transform offset, and that'll bring up this icon, and then we can shift his position. For some reason, it's not letting me shift, even though it's showing a shift in position. Here, he's got his avatar. Capsule collider we don't need. In fact, we don't need any of this, so let's get rid of it. So remove. Well, let's get rid of these guys first. And see if that helps. So now it's positioned. Yeah, I think that's part of the reason right there. Is like, see how the camera's behaving a little bit differently now. That's because all of that other stuff was kind of locking it out. So now if we go to timeline, and it started him back in the right place, if we scroll, you can see him moving and the camera shifting based on his position. So what we can do now, going back to where I was, we'll fix the camera movement, is we select the animation, take that position, shift it. Notice the camera moves with it. He's a little low. And we want to have him coming around the corner, so let's make him rotate to, don't worry, we'll get that camera fixed. I just want to make him 90 degrees. So he's coming around the corner, walking this way. So now when he walks, he starts here. He's coming around the corner, and we want him to turn going in a different direction. So basically we can take this animation, figure out where we want him to be stepped, or how we want him stepping when he turns, like there. Take this and add a copy with a different offset. So basically now this, if we take this and change these offsets to, especially the rotation 0, and then if we right click on this track and say match offsets to previous clip, he'll pick up should pick up and start rotate it to go this way. But what we want, yeah, that one's rotated correctly. This one, we want it to rotate this way. So it'll be at 0. That's where we match, when we match the offsets, it matched the rotation too. So see how he does like a transition, boom, boom, like it's a hard one, but then he's going in the right direction. So all we have to do to get him to do a smooth rotation is just drag that animation across itself. Like that. It's a little robotic, but he's a robot, so it works. Okay. Then he goes walking down the street that way. Now, let's work on our cameras for that. So we don't want these cameras following him. We want a stationary camera on this first shot. Let's get this free look all the way out. And we'll delete that one for now. Front cam we may or may not use, but we'll take the side cam. And we're going to change it from being a side cam. We don't want it to follow him, so we're going to break the follow right here and turn it to nothing. So now it'll be looking at him, but it won't follow him. So if we take it and move it somewhere over here, again, we may want to drag our game and make a separate window with it. And get our playhead and our timeline back to, yeah, there we go. So you can see our view now. So we'll select, is that the wrong one? Which one? Yeah, that's the side cam. It's not following. Let me turn on our timeline and get it to hold. So you see him walking, and maybe it's that we're too far down the street on our camera position. So we want this to be further, like that. Now it's following him when it can't even see him, so what we may want to do is give it something else to follow besides him, not to mention that his following his, you see how it's targeting his head and his head's got a bob to it. We don't want the camera so locked onto his head. We could fix that with this dampening in terms of the aim transposer, this. And I'll just show you what that looks like real quick. So if I crank that up on the vertical, so that when it's following him, it's a lot more steady. See how it doesn't bob now? Okay, so let me pull this out a little bit further too. Just checking to see if this looks right. Now the issue here is it's still following him, and I'd rather it just sort of be locked and him walk into the scene. Or even better, have it be following something else that's panning towards him and then meets up where they meet up. So what we can do is, instead of targeting him, let's add a null object, game object, and we're going to create empty. We'll call this camera target. And we'll put it where we want the camera to look. So then we can target the camera with, or target that with the camera. So we'll do the CM side cam, and instead of making it look at his hand, we're going to look at camera target. So now you see we're looking at this invisible object. Let's see what that looks like from a point of view of him walking down the street. That's cool. So you're like, well, what? Now we can't follow him, but what we can do is we can make that object follow him, or appear to follow him, using some keyframe animation. So what I want to do is select the target, move it down a little bit, and I probably want to animate it. So let's grab the camera target, drag it into our timeline, make an animation track, and make sure we're at the beginning here. So maybe what I want to do is start recording, and if you hit this red button, that's for record. You can start and insert an animation where we're panning the keyframe, the camera move like this. So we're kind of like looking, and I want to do like a 3-second pan to get the camera target lined up. Right here. Now let's get it so that it's in the right position for where he'll do the turn. And maybe a little bit lower. There we go. So we're kind of panning down. Let's get it lower here too. So it's panning, and then it's him. It'll hold. He turns. Let's set its position again right there. And then as he's walking, I'm just moving further out here. It's already picked up another camera, but I can still move the camera target to his head so that this camera keeps looking. So what we'll do is we'll drag this further out. So there's our pan. He comes in, now we start following him. So you can see how it's moving. And we'll stop the recording there because we'll transition to another camera. Then, let me think. So I kind of like that. But I don't like where he's already into the, behind the scene. I want it to kind of come there. So I just want to take his animations and move them in the timeline a little bit so that he's not quite, he's just starting to come around the corner. So I'm just shifting the position of those animations. It's waiting, here he comes, walking. Now my tracking positions are going to be off because I've shifted his animation, so I need to go back to record. Go back and get to that position. Now this is the tricky part. You want to make sure you zoom in enough that you are literally on that keyframe, because if you're off, you're going to create a jump. Select your camera targets. So he's, actually I could just shift the keyframe. Well, we'll hold it there, but then he's still moving. Hasn't really started the turn yet. Actually, let's go into the timeline so I can shift the keyframes. So if I just select these and then hold down shift so that they stay on the same position. If you don't do that, you're going to literally shift the position of the keyframes. So I'm just taking those and shifting them further out. Hold down shift again. He comes in. Let me just zoom out. See how my camera moves going too fast now. But that's because these are too far now. I need to shift them to the end. And just grab and shift those further out. He's walking. Yep, and at that point I can shift the position. So that's how you go and fix your keyframes once you've changed the animation. Let me zoom. I'm just mouse wheeling to scroll out to get more fit. So we go pan to him. He's coming. We're following him. You can see where he's starting to float off the street. That's the thing we're going to have to fix in the animation. It's the drift on the Y. See how he starts low and he slowly drifts up off the ground. Let's fix that now. We'll just use this to do it. Let's save what we have. Save project. Get back to our view. Then select our heavy walk loop and select it in the project here. Edit it, and the thing we want to look at is this root transform Y position. We're just going to shift it down. Sorry, the other way. Just watch the way it shifts him into the ground. We'll apply and see what happens here to him. Go back to our timeline. So he's too low into the ground now, and you can see where he's coming from. He's still slowly rising. So if we go heavy walk loop, edit, we may want to bake this into pose and do it based on feet. And try to get him to the ground if we can, I think. .01, apply, see what happens to Bender here. Let's keep our timeline locked, yeah. So he's not floating, he's not shifting his position, so that's good. I just need to lower him down into the ground more because of the difference in the height. So we'll just go a little bit more down, apply, still floats just a tiny bit. Probably something like 1.5. Let's see what that looks like. See how the 1 is still lower though? And then suddenly it's like at transition he's fixed. But this one looks good. Maybe make it 1.6. And same thing for this one. So this one we can do our position just up on the transform. So put them up into the ground. See if that stays aligned. Yep. Okay. There we go. So that's how you fix that. Save. And save project. All right, so now let's talk about this second camera. We'll keep him walking. This heavy walk loop will go past, and then we want to shift to some other camera. So this could be just that side cam since we've got a stationary cam. So let's make this one be, let's see, it is following him and it's looking at his head. So let's just change its position. This will be CM front cam. Further out. It's very low. I don't know why. And so there's our view. We're at the camera now, so let me like shift it. Just trying to get it in the right position. Kind of want it a little bit back. you can tell that we've got like an angle problem in terms of his walk there, because he's starting to walk off the sidewalk. We'll fix that in a second. Yeah, I think, can't tell if I want it to be following him. I don't think I do. I'm going to take this transform, follow off, say, turn that off so that it just is shifting position, and now he's going to be going somewhere. So that means we can then grab this front cam and shift it a little bit more forward so that when we hit it, there we go. So now the question is, when he's walking, so yeah, he's got that rotation. It's got the rotation back. I think it's in the animation. So we can shift. Let's go. I think I might have turned off his baked rotation root transform. Apply. And let's look at the timeline now. Yeah, now it's straight. See how he stays. I had accidentally turned off the rotation. So he stays good. Camera, cut. Alright, so there's our front cam, but we want to do a transition. We don't want to do a hard cut from this to that. So, and maybe we don't even want it to be that far back on this cam. So let's go in a little bit, select, and a little bit lower maybe. So we'll keep the animation going for there and make the cam go longer. See where that ends up. We're going to do a transition to a run here, right about here. Let's try to make this do a transition though. So we're going zoom, and it'll just drop. That's a nice, pretty good cut. We'll do it over more time though. All right, let's make a run animation. Let's save project, and let's look at our spreadsheet and find a run. It looks, yeah, maybe we want to do like a jump too. And then so he's sort of surprised, like he's waiting, and then do a run. So let's check out these jumps at 13, 38 to 41. Let's look at those. Project 13. You can see where you need these spreadsheets. There's 38. That is not a jump, that's a step. So like I said, they're one off after some point. So if you find that you're looking at something and it's described as a jump and it's not right, just go to the next one and it should be. That's not right. That's not a good jump. I mean, it's a jump. We're in the right spot, but I want more of a surprise. It's like he's... So these are more like flat-footed. Let's look at I'm just looking for here's some more jumps. So 16. Oh, these are forward jumps. So let's do let's just see what 16 looks like. That was the first one, 1601. Kind of op. Which, if we do it right, that may be a good one. Let's go ahead and edit that one. We'll make a new, call this hop jump, and we'll see if we can make it loop. So there's our T-pose. There's our start. And then the end, it's probably just going to loop. So let's see. Yep. All right. So that'll be our loop. So we will do a loop time and bake this. We'll see if it lines up and leave that. Say OK, apply. Now in our timeline, we can add right here from animation clip, do root jump or hop. This hop jump, it's going to be really small. And we'll butt it up against the walk here. Notice that he's got it's a difference in the position, and it also looks like he jumps into the ground. So if we right click, mash offsets to previous click. See how it kind of steps up? That's the difference in that Y position. So if we go back to our hop jump, edit, and just shift the root transform at feet, and we'll just go take him down into the ground just a bit and apply it. Still too high. Let's make it 16. Lowered him down a little bit. Then he hops. Okay, so let's just overlap that quite a bit. So it's like he's kind of afraid, or like he's startled. It's not a great hop, but it'll serve as a transition to whatever we're going to do for the run. All right, let's save that. Save projects. And let's go look for a run. So run jog. That one looks pretty good. Okay, so 35:23. Let's go edit it. We're going to make a new track. Call that run or bender run so we can find it. Then let's go and edit. Get rid of the T-pose. Get down to that start position. And let's scroll down so I can see them all. And then look at what we can do to scroll. So that's probably a good run loop. Let's see what that looks like. It's pretty good. A little bit of a drift. So let's go bake that. The root transform rotation. We'll go, yeah, this way. and apply it. I'm just going to come back and select that so I get it on the straight line and I can check it for drift. So he's going the opposite way now, so let's look. Whatever I did was too much. Let's go the opposite. Do it again. Still too much. I'm just going and clicking on that and then hitting edit again so I get him on the straight line and I can check it. Still drifts. Let's see if we do it based on original. Apply. I like to be able to compare it to the there we go. So yeah, no drift. See how he stays on the line. All right, that's good. Now, let's go back to our timeline and then add that clip there. From animation clip, Bender, run. We'll drag it out for some loops, bring it up, and match to offsets to previous. So I'm just trying to get to the camera. So you can see where he's floating off the ground again. So it's rather than mess with the loop, I'm just going to keep that. I'm going to set an offset down, but I want to get this kind of transitioned. Then we'll set the mesh offsets to previous. And I can pull this forward just a tad. Then we'll do it again. All right, so then I just need to get it dropped to the ground, so I can select that animation and shift down. Looks good. So he starts running down the street. We can lose that, carry this out. We're going to swap cameras. We'll make a new camera at the end of the street. Probably have it get to there and then show them running up to the stop. So you can see where we're going to need to add some buildings because of that camera look. We'll see if that sticks. Let's add another virtual camera. That'll be the front. So Cinemachine, create virtual camera. Call that end of street cam. And we will position that in our game view. We're going to make it look at him. Actually, we'll make it look at, let's make it look at the camera targets. And we'll move that into position before we get to that cam. So like, because this isn't following the camera target anymore. Which one is this? One's targeting his head. We can select the camera target here, make a keyframe right there, and then right after that just shift it to the end of the street so that we've got something to look at there. It'll be in position that way. So then when we get to the end of the street in our camera, we can drag our end of the street cam into the view. We'll do a hard cut, and we just need to get it into position. So we want to look at camera target and grab that camera, pull it to the end of the street. Yeah. Figure out the way to get the look here, something like that. So he runs from off camera and he'll come to the end there. And we're going to make him go into a stance where he'll just start waiting at the bus. He's floating off the screen again, so we do need to fix that animation. So select that. Our project, I think it's this bender run, edit, and we want to bake the root transform, bake into pose at feet, just shift him down a little bit, apply, and we'll look at our timeline and see. Too much, so but we can shift the by baking it, he should stay in line. So now we can take and select our run and set that to 0. No, that's 2. We need to make it up. Looks good. Just want to make sure everything stays lined up. Yeah. Okay. So there's our loop, and now we need to get a stance. So we have this, he runs, and then he kind of just pops and waits. So let's do a little transition. Oh, that's in the camera, sorry. This is where he pops and waits. So he kind of shifts, he sort of glides there. All you have to do to fix that is match offsets based on that transition. Except that he's not far enough, so pull this further out. Let him get a little bit further like that. Match the offsets. Let's see how he walks. That looks good. See how there's a little bit of a slide. It's based on where he ends. Wow, his look back. He's looking all the way back, and that's in that rotation where I set it to be in his head, where see how he turns his head and rotates all the way back. That's in that 180-degree neck turn that I gave him. So let's go back and fix that. Be fine. So now let's go and open our cutscene. Lost my timeline scrub again, so when he looks, so now he doesn't turn his head so far. That looks good. All right, so there's our animation, our camera. Let's play it. So now we're in our freeform move, but we notice that he's locked in that animation because we had to, in order to get the animations cropped, we had to, or movable in the timeline, we had to take off the third-person controller on him. So what we can do to fix that, if we want to go into controllable mode for his character, is basically create a animation of, or not an animation, an activation track. So what we do is we make a duplicate of him. C. Just duplicate Bender. Call this Bender act or third person. Then we can add all of the components, but we need to make sure that his position is where we want him to be at the end. So I'm in game mode right now. So he has no, because he's a different track, he's got no animation driving him. So wherever this timeline ends up, we select that. Notice that he's running into himself. So when we get to the end of this wait, wherever that's at, I want to put his character there. And get it roughly lined up for the animation. So timeline. It's pretty good. I think it'll be fine. And then what we can do is if we take his third person here, we'll add all of our components. So let's go and copy from our third person character standard asset prefab this guy. Use that third person animator controller on him. There. Alright, so now he'll be controllable. This one will. But we want him to be deactivated. So we turn him off. He's not visible. And in our timeline, we will select and add an activation track. And it'll be for him. And add an activation clip so that he's active. There. So he's deactivated and then suddenly he's active. And then add Bender activation track for that one. Add an activation clip, and that'll mean he's activated for this. Sorry, these guys are. Delete this one. So So it'll go up to there. So it's like one's active, he animates, and then this guy's active. And we'll see what happens. Oh, we can get rid of this guy though. He runs, cut to the clip. He's running down the road, stops and looks, waits. And then, you know, maybe we could add like a bus going by here. That is the, so now I'm in this mode. So I've just activated his third person mode when I get to the end of that line. So now I can navigate. My camera's not set up to follow or target him yet, but I can fix that. Free look here, and I want it to target Bender third person and look at his head, which I believe is the second one. Nope, because it's looking at this direction. So you'll know it's the second one when it shifts its position. There we go. And everything else should be okay then. That way it'll move. And we want to set its, I think its priority is the right one right now. That one's 11. Yeah, this one's 12. Let's save. The last thing I want to add is that little bus going by. So it's like an indicator for going into mode, and it makes a nice little kind of wipe transition. So if we go to our timeline, we can add another object, game object. Select when that's going by. Set my end of street cam to be a little bit closer. So we might even add like an animation on that end of street cam. This one, where we do an override track and have it positioned to keyframe to move the camera out. But you could also have a second camera that's also another end of street cam and do a transition from one to the other where you're slowly zooming out. I think I'll do that just to show how to. So if we take that, this, I can't do it on this one, so if I copy this position, copy and paste a second camera, call this industry cam 2, and then just pull that further back, and then put it into this track. So that there's a transition. Kind of want that head to be whipped around as he's doing it, so I may do a transition in the walk and the wait animation as well to make it look like his head, because he does this head look like that. right there. So what I can do is go C and V, paste that. I want to get to, so he's doing his thing, and then this one I want it to be. So he's going to do that look right here. See how his head starts to turn? Like that. And then that way I can take this, run offsets. So the bus goes by, and he sees it goes by. So I just need to get it timed right. Zoom in. So he sees it coming, goes by, whips his head around. Let's see if there's another better place for it to turn his head. Trying to just get this bigger. Let me get that free cam look back, and I'll make this go longer so I can see more of the animation just to watch it. The activists on there too. And this one needs to go longer. That's the look. So when the bus goes by, pull that to there. This just needs to go further. And then we can end the clip there, because he still looks like he's walking there. So like that, and holds perhaps. And then that end of street cam can end there. And my activation can start there. And then put this right, butt it up against its, oops. So rather than doing that hard transition, let's just do a bit of a transition. I think too, though, that I made that transition go too long. Let's start that transition and make it slower. Slowly pan back. The bus goes by. He looks. Yeah, that hard's not going to work. That could work. Yeah, we'll go with that. Do a transition to get to it. Make that active. And then when it's let loose, it'll be the control. So we don't need to do it for too long. We want to basically get it to there and let go of the clip then. Okay, so save. Project. He looks, oh, we need to deactivate the bus too though. And I think the that's where we activate it. Yep, that way we get into him and he's ready to go. Okay. Deactivate the bus. This is the bus animator, so if we add a bus activation track, it'll be, we don't even need it to be active until really we get to here. And then as soon as we get to it going to there, just deactivate it. There we go. And save. Let's see how that plays. Play. So we're doing our cuts. He's walking. Side camera. You can see a little bit of the toggle. Cuts. Start the pan when he gets to a stop. He's waiting. Now we pan the camera back so we get out of the bus's way. And he's looking. The bus goes by. He looks. Now we're in that mode. We can just start running around. And you go play catch up with the bus. So you can see where if we get into this third person or the game mode, we're going to need some more buildings and blocks here at the end of the street. Just to help in the terms of the transition. So the next thing I want to show you, probably the last thing I want to show you for this video, is the idea of adding a final effect look to the thing, because right now it's kind of flat. We've got this lighting. We could add a lot more to it. We could bake these shadows. You can see how there's this notion of real-time shadow mapping kind of cascades, and you can see that if you pull down on the shaded, these shadow cascades, you'll see where they transition. Basically those are set in the render settings under project settings, graphics. I think it might be quality. Yeah, these. Here's your shadow cascades for controlling the overall look, and you can see that there's a near shadow cascade, which will be a higher resolution, and then this cascade 1, cascade 2, cascade 3, that's that red back there where there's like no. So if you push that back, then you just get your shadows to go a little bit farther in terms of quality. This is like a graphics quality setting type thing. That's how you change that. And it won't matter too much unless you've got like a really detailed quality game. but I just wanted to show that to you. But the bigger deal is if we add, let's save these post effects. So we don't need, well, we'll need this timeline. We'll leave it up for now. What I want to show though is the idea of adding a post effects type layer to the project. Now, what you can happens, go to Window, Package Manager. We are looking for post-processing. Yeah, it's 2.19.2 verified. This 2.17, so we'll go ahead and install that since it's set up there. We'll do that one. It's going to install. All right, so we've gone and installed our post effects, and if we want to add them to the scene, we can add, and you can add this to anything. So if we add a component like a blank, let's just add a not a component, 3D object, or create an empty component. Just put it right here. There's nothing there, but we can add this effects component to it, this volume. And if you set, now if it doesn't actually physically have a volume, then you can't just get anything from it that way. But if you turn on is global, then you can actually apply this to the entire scene. So what we can do is we can make in our project in assets, we will make a post-processing profile. You need this profile in order to create a bunch of different kind of post effects looks for your scene, and I'll show you what these look like. So we're going to call this Bender Post. Select that, and then to get anything into it, you have to add an effect. So you'll say Unity, and then we can add like ambient occlusion. We'll add, I don't want the auto exposure, we'll add bloom. I'll tell what these are in a minute. Color grading, and depth of field, and vignettes. So you can see there's others, but we're just going to add these as a default. So now in that, you can see I've got that post volume applied there. If I click on this, I can say Bender Post. With that applied, nothing happens because I need to put that, I need to tell it which layer I want that to kind of add to, what layers I want to render as a post effect. So I need to add a new layer. So in this layer 8 right here, I'm just going to call it post processing and tell it which layer I want to render. So that'll be that. I can put my object itself, give it its layer. Right now it's in default. I want to put it in post processing. And then in my post processing, so is global the priority. Here's my overrides. Oh, and I need to put my camera, the main camera, have that set up in the post-processing layer, and my CM cams too, I believe. Do you want to set the post-processing for children? Yes. And a discrete cam. Yes. Discrete cam 2. The reason for putting in these layers is you don't want to apply these post-processing effects to everything in the scene, because you could say in the post-processing, there's a way, I've just got to figure out where I'm targeting that. believe it's got to be on the camera. It's probably here. Let's see if we can add it. Rendering. There's a layer that you add to the camera. It's post-processing layer. And you want to tell it which layer. So if you do everything, it'll render everything. But if you want to get it to do the post-process, let's do nothing. And then post-processing, we can turn on anti-aliasing. The easiest way to tell if it's actually applying, because it looks like it might have done something. Yeah, you can see it changing the anti-aliasing. We need to go into our post-process and just do something kind of radical with it so we can change the mode and tone mapping. We're going to leave it at, we'll do post exposure and crank it up. And I just want to give it a color. So like a tint, yeah, color filter. So give it some blue. And then if we look at our timeline, so it's still not applying. Oh wait, did I turn it off on the camera? Yeah, it's supposed to turn it off. So see, now I've got this color filter that essentially is my post-processing that I've applied to the camera so that it will render all of these different effects. So when I select this, I can change the exposure, create more contrast if I want. So it's a way of doing like overall control of the final image. So this classic, I want to do some intensity on this filter. I want to create this. This is a vignette. This that I like the effect of a lot. The depth of field is basically controlled via the aperture. So if I change this, you can see where the background starts to get blurry. And my focus distance, depending on the distance, is foreground or background. So I can shift this. The focal length, that's all good. My bloom is the, this is interesting. It's like a film effect where you can wash out and create this kind of like blurry light glow. It's kind of a noir effect, you might say. And have some control over that. So the whole point of these post effects is to create this kind of like visual look that you can then toggle and change. So right now you can see where he moved that depth of field was too shallow for this. He's gone blurry. So I can go back and like find this in my scene, my depth of field, change distance or even aperture, so I can crank it up so it's a little bit sharper, and it takes longer for it to get shallow blurred. Let's see. I'm just trying to get it balanced across the whole scene. There he is. All right, so maybe this color I don't like. Maybe I want to make it a little less washed out blue. Ridley Scott. More warm. Give it a warmer tone. And tone mapping wise, I could actually look at different tone maps for it, because right now it's using this kind of high definition tone mapping. So I can go neutral, Aces, which is more film effect. Let's look at that over the life of it. All right. So anyway, you get the idea. These color tones are basically like trying to give your own signature. I suggest you could use them as a way of creating different time effects. So like you could have full color for real time, and then if it's a memory or something like that, it could go black and white, or so you could use this hue shift where not hue shift, you want to change the saturation, so turn that off. Make it go black and white, so it could be a memory, could be super contrasty color, either way, if it's a dream. So it's a way of kind of creating extra states in a post. Now, the thing is, right now, it's global. I've applied this effect to everything, and that's partly because the thing that I applied it to didn't actually have a volume, even though I've set it up to be a post volume using this post-process volume script. So if I take that, instead of applying it to an actual point, and I go and I make a 3D object cube and apply, let me copy this post-process volume script, copy that, and apply it to this volume, and then lose this. So I just removed the post-process volume from that, and I added it to this. I can turn off the mesh render on this so that I just get the cube. I don't need that. And I don't really need a box collider either, because it's going to be something I can walk through. And then I need to add this cube to my post-processing layer. Now I'm back into it. And let's see how big this volume is. Oh, it's also set because of the way I set it's to global. So now I have this volume that if I scale it by turning off the global and giving a scale to it, if I move it to encompass the camera, it'll show up. Just give me a sec. Yeah, so you have to have that box collider on it because it's looking for box collision. So it knows that it's collided with it. It's like a physics test, but you see how it turns green? And if I move this volume now up and out, you can see where it collides and doesn't, and you can see the difference in the effect. So with that post-process volume, you can create a blend distance, and that'll just push this distance off of the volume. So like that. And what we can do is we can make this entire cutscene have that post-process layer by just scaling this volume to fit all the cameras. And then activate it and deactivate it based on that timeline, so that we go to a real-time different effect look. So what I'll do is I've got that. There's my post-process for the entire scene. That's the entire cut scene, so it cuts it. We see it. And then the last thing I want to do is take that post-effect cube. I'm going to lose this one. We'll call this post volume. Without the extra E at the end. And we'll add it as an activation track. So it's going to be active for the entire length of the cutscene until we basically get to our transition. So that it's like, boom, done. Okay, let's see how that works. Go full screen. I'm actually going to set it to render in full screen. So when you're testing this out, test it small window. But if you want to see how it's going to look, just click on this maximize on play, so that when you go full for game mode, it'll actually go full screen. So here's our cutscene. He's walking down the street. We got our post effect. We could probably add a bunch of reflection probes to his walk now in order to get the reflections to look better. He jumps. See how he ran out of the reflection probe there? You can see where he kind of left it and entered another. He's at the end. Waiting for the bus. So now we're out of our zone. Bus runs by. Now we're in our full screen mode, or our gameplay mode. Okay. There's a little bit of weirdness there at the end with the scale of the box because our camera got outside of it. So if we just move that, make it bigger so that there's no doubt, and that way we'll still be blue, and then when we cut, it'll deactivate. And let me look at these light reflection probes actually. So I've got one there that I have not baked because I added it at a point when I hadn't had the buildings in, so I'm baking that with the building. Oh, the buildings aren't static, so let me go select all of these, including the sidewalks, and add them to static so that they'll bake into the light maps. Sidewalk, building. Just want to make sure. All right, so now when I bake, got all my reflections for that. There's probably another one. Did I have another one, or did I only add the one? I think I only added the one, so let's add a couple down the street. So we'll have CV there. I'm going to make it sampled from this point. Bake. CV. We'll do one here in between. I'm just going to, sorry. I need to make the Z longer. And bake that. Then CV, one more for this one. And I'll take this one, put it at the end, and bake that. Now when he goes into full play mode, gameplay mode, I may need like another option that's just bigger reflection probes for realism, where so like something that covers the places where he can actually go. But that's for you to decide, whatever your final scene is. So obviously you can set a bunch of these up, but let's leave it at that. I'll save and we'll show the final play. So hopefully this was useful. It's basically, I'm doing this as a tutorial for a class that I'm teaching. The idea is to take a character and create a narrative from pre-existing like storyboards or a comic book or something, and to create a cutscene. And then later on in a secondary project to take that cutscene and build an entire kind of prototype of a game out of it. So basically I've given you just about everything that you need, minus some of the scripting game elements like collision cubes and things like that to create. This at least covers the cutscene part. And then actually get you into the game, the third-person character controller as well. So this would be the cutscene. You could add music and things for it for sure, extra characters, whatever. But this will get you to that point of creating the cutscene and getting into gameplay. From here, you might do like a platformer level where he's got to jump across certain things to get to some reward at the end of the game. And a lot of that's going to be, we'll make a secondary video for that and how to create those types of situations. So hopefully this was useful. Let me know if you have any questions. Leave them in the comments.